Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is in local practice here as an internist, but you also probably know him not just as a result of local appearances on radio and television, but also he's that network guy who doesn't sound like a lot of the other Muslim people who speak for the faith and the political movements. He happens to be the founder and chairman of AIFD. I will ask you to remind us what that stands for.
The American Islamic Forum for Democracy.
How many members?
We have about 100 members and a growing staff of 4 people right now.
You know, if you take the extremist, if you take the people who are prone to violence, and you just put them over here in the corner, I'm not even talking about them. And then you take 100 people, and maybe a few hundred besides that, who feel as you do, maybe a few thousand. It just seems like you are outnumbered by the people who live here, but who are fundamentally suspicious of America.
Well, you know, if you look at any movement that has changed the consciousness of America or the West, it has always started with 5 or 10 or 20 people. I think back to the movie The Great Debaters about the small school of black Americans that decided to debate the rest of America about the ideologies of the civil rights movement. That was in the 30s, and it took 20, 30 years until we saw the growth of the civil rights movement. I think similarly within the Muslim community, there's a small group of us. I'm one of them. I can give you 3 or 4 cities in America and many countries that these things are happening, and slowly there's some momentum we're building, and we'll start to take back our faith.
Barack Obama, and we were talking about his staff's reaction to the Muslim women in the picture behind him, but he's also had this albatross around his neck all the time. Not just that he's a Muslim, which he isn't, he's a Christian, but about the fact that you can't trust a guy with a name like that.
Well, you know, that we need to get past that ignorance. The issue, though, is that I think, as I was saying before, the symptom of removing someone from a picture is that of a candidate that wants to sweep things under the rug and not deal with them. And as long as he continues to do that, I think America is going to continue to be confused. He should have dealt with the ideology of his pastor. The mixture of religion and politics, I think, is something I'm trying to deal with. When I see imams speaking anti-American things, conspiracy theories, etc., I immediately send a letter to my mosque, I post a blog about it, and I make it clear that this is not anything to do with my faith. And I think similarly, he not only needs to do that within his own faith, but I think regarding the war on terror, which I think is misnamed, the war against militant Islamism or political Islam, the candidates need to start being clear about what their strategy is going to be.
Has McMahon been clear?
Not really, no.
Are you worried that a military guy would be more inclined to attack Iran?
Well, you know, I don't believe that actually us attacking Iran is, I think they need to feel that there's a threat there, but I just don't think that that's going to happen. But we have to realize also, Iran as a nuclear power, this isn't just saber rattling. Here you have a person that thinks he's going to be responsible for the end of times comeback of the Mahdi, and that somehow the Armageddon concept in the Middle East will be his salvation into heaven. And if he has nuclear weapons and says the things that he did in Holocaust denial, which actually is also about denying the existence of Israel, you can't sit down here complacently and believe that Israel is not threatened if they get nuclear weapons, and we aren't threatened in the West.
Well, we now in news are talking about rumors about Israel with the flyover that they did, the little test flight that they did to get Iran's attention, no doubt, in the rest of the world. But do you have to also advise Israel not to be quite so trigger happy?
Well, trigger happy is one thing, but I think demonstrating that they will not allow Iran to be nuclear empowered is important. I think in '82 you saw with Saddam Hussein that they made sure that he didn't have similar type of power, and I think that that proved to be a wise act. So am I saying that they should be trigger happy? No. But the only effective diplomacy happens when the people you're sitting across the table from have genuine concerns about what you may or may not do. If they're not fearful of your effort to stick by some legitimate landmarks that they need to achieve, which the International Atomic Agency has tried to have Iran stand by, then it's toothless.
You know, America probably would not have any kind of diplomatic dialogue with that part of the world, as insular as we can become, if it wasn't for oil. If we didn't need them for petroleum, you know doggone well, it would be, oh yes, let's get some hummus, honey, and that's about it.
And that's actually, it's turning out to be one of the, probably the biggest issue in the campaign, which is energy costs.
Yes.
And all we're looking at it is from how do we get Saudi Arabia to turn up the spigot, how do we figure out the economics, et cetera, and nobody's looking at the fact that this is the elephant in the room as far as the war of ideas, is that America and the West can either pay now or pay later. Dubai is constructing at an unbelievable exponential rate of growth there, and they are just living lavishly off of the American taxpayer. And we aren't looking at the importance of alternative energy, because until the Middle East can just drink their oil without any place to sell it, they are not going to have economic growth. The illiteracy rates aren't going to change, and they're going to continue to have oppressive monarchies and dictatorships because they have no reason to work very hard because they have the oil.
The middle of November, there's a new president, and he will take office in January. Advise that person for energy policy alone.
I think it's important to create a large amount of tax incentives for alternative energy. Look at some of the work that Jim Woolsey has done and others in this area as far as completely battery-driven cars. There are many out there, and possibly looking at Anwar, looking at offshore drilling, drill now, drill more here in America, because we can pay later or pay now, and the issue is that once you start being no longer dependent, we can turn to the Saudis and say, you know what, your school teaching hate in Northern Virginia needs to be shut down, your radical texts coming out are no longer going to be accepted, your imams coming to teach Muslims in America supposedly Islam will no longer receive visas. All of these things need to change, but they don't want to rock the boat because of our energy costs.
We're out of time, but I have to ask you for a quick answer to this question. What is the hot spot in the Middle East that you're most concerned about?
Boy, that's a great question. I'm probably most concerned about Iran because there's no clear policy about what's going on. I think Iraq is proving to settle down, and as long as we can have some stability there, it may end up being a platform for change. But and there's a lot of, I think if Iraq becomes part of our ability to lead change because of the large Shia population, we may be able to impact Iran without all the saber rattling.
You got to come back and visit us, and we will invite you regularly. It's
anytime, Pat.
Very, very interesting hearing someone like Zuhdi Jasser, Dr. Jasser, talking about the Middle East. So one of these days, I got to talk to him about my appendix. Oh, no, I'm terribly sorry. That's gone. You know what? Here's a name that you might be hearing. Congressman Titla. Well, she'd like that office, and she's going to be a part of Arizona Native News coming up with Linda Whitewolf on the Pat McMahon Show next.